Chris, the Bear, Fallica, ESPN, College Gameday, ESPN.com. Y'all know him, love him. Chris, welcome back to 24/7 Sports Social Distance Chat.
Yeah, good to be back. And obviously a little bit of positive news there yesterday with the ACC releasing a conference-only type schedule with the one division and leaving an open date for a non-conference game. So in the midst of all the negativity with Rutgers and Michigan State putting their entire team in quarantine, it was good to see a conference get out there and actually throw a schedule out there, and hopefully we'll get to see it played.
No doubt. And with a schedule, we don't have dates yet, but at least we have games. That has to give you all a little bit of an opportunity for College Game Day, maybe some planning, kind of force any hope for the people out there that Game Day might be able to get on site? Or
Yeah, well, I will tell you this. That is the preference of everybody involved with the show at the company that I have spoken with. And we've had meetings, not necessarily every week, but maybe every other week, or definitely a regular bait to talk about planning for all potential possibilities for the show. A show in the studio in Connecticut, which is something that, quite frankly, nobody wants. And we've actually even been told that just because of the quarantine in the state of Connecticut, that's the most difficult show for us to pull off, because you have Desmond Howard lives in Florida. Kirk Herbstreit lives in Tennessee. Lee Corso lives in Florida. David Pollock lives in Georgia. Maria in Georgia as well. Splitting time between New York. So like there's time. I mean, it's difficult to get people to Connecticut, and then you have to worry about a 14-day quarantine in the state to get in the building, and bringing people in from the outside into the ESPN campus. So the preference is for everybody to do it. So we've been kicking around a bunch of stuff. Do we do a show from a campus with no fans? Do we do a show from a campus site with some fans? Do we do a show from inside of a stadium where a game is going to be taking place, but preferably earlier in the day with some warm up and some actions behind us? Do we do the show from inside the stadium or the campus of the site of what the ABC primetime game that Kirk would call to eliminate a travel leg? So I will tell you this: everybody involved with the show wants to see the show come from the site of a college football game, and hopefully the circumstances will allow us to do that.
Chris, not to hate on Connecticut, but I'm hearing a couple names here: Florida, Georgia, ESPN, Why World of Sport, Orlando by me. Let's move Game Day into the bubble.
See, that would be a great idea. Maybe we can get Jesse Palmer involved as well. Maybe move it to like a Canadian bubble as well, to try and spread the growth of the sport and the show in Canada. But you're right. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out, because with the NBA starting back up now and the NHL starting back up with the bubble, we saw the good thing about, I mean, there really isn't a good thing, but at least with Major League Baseball, there were people who were skeptical about what happens if one team gets it. Was it going to spread? At least so far, we've seen the incident with the Marlins not really affect any other teams. So I think that's obviously something that college football is watching. And if Major League Baseball can pull it off where the Marlins don't infect any other teams, and that's to be taken as a positive sign. So I think the fact that college football going to start a little bit later, they get a little educational purposes from all these pro teams.
There's no doubt. So much like y'all face challenges, state regulations, and the potential to have to sub in people, so do college teams. I recently wrote about coaches might have to use all 100 players on their roster throughout the course of a season, just depending on the cases that they have, and if their schools will let them keep going. What are some traits of teams that make you maybe buy them a little bit more? We know you're into the gaming market here. What are some traits of teams that maybe this year you're going to value more, and then maybe some traits that if you notice when evaluating a team, you say, ooh, I might actually kind of sell that team a little more than I normally would?
Yeah, I'm usually not the guy who's going to run out there and holler and be like, oh, a team with a quarterback situation where they're replacing an incumbent quarterback, and they're bringing in a freshman, and usually I'm fine playing teams with new starting quarterbacks, and so, but this is a year where I think with it was an unusual off season. You didn't have a practice time in the spring with with these newer players to acclimate them. So I would probably downgrade some teams that had some uncertain quarterback situations where they were bringing new people in and they're unable to learn the playbook. Maybe you want to downgrade a team that, and I'm kind of like on the fence here with Georgia. Like Georgia's a team I love. I think defensively they're going to be awesome. And now not only do you have Jamie Newman, you've got JT Daniels as well, and a new offensive coordinator and a new offensive line coach, and still young receivers. Like that is I mean, that could be boom or bust depending on how you view it. So normally I would be all in on Georgia this year, but I do wonder just because while Daniels and Newman have played, they haven't necessarily played with the guys that they're on now. So maybe by the time we do play the season, and we'll see what happens in camps, that Georgia will be a team I'll be higher on again, like I was before all this. But I think teams that might have the more consistent lack of turnover at quarterback positions are teams that I'd pay attention to, and I think teams that have solid foundations on the coaching staff that don't have a lot of turnover on the coaching staff would be ones that I would look at. Like a team like Ohio State, I think I mean, A, they have a ton of talent. B, you've got your quarterback back. C, you're in a conference where there's probably only one conference game that they can lose. So like Ohio, obviously the question is going to be, will Justin, if the season goes sideways or delayed even more, does Justin Fields opt out? That's going to be a question. I think that's going to be one of the next questions that I think are brought up and debates. All these, we saw Virginia Tech had thoroughly opt out as well, but like how many people will opt out and not willing to risk injury and potentially a shortened season with the NFL draft?
We actually were kicking that idea around, like, what if we ran a simulation if you just took one of these random NFL mock drafts out there, wiped the 32 guys off the rosters that you're projected to go in round one, what would happen? It's really pretty interesting. You know, Chris, a team that I've been thinking about recently, that I think fits your profile, and it was a team that back in March pre-COVID, I was really not that high on because I thought the hype was a little bit ahead of product, is North Carolina. Right. Yeah, everybody was super high in North Carolina. But now that I think about it, a ton of offensive continuity returns. We always see these games early in the season where these offenses look pretty poor. I think back to Miami, Florida, last year, 2 years ago, and ended up one of those offenses turned out to be pretty good. But like the lack of practice time in a normal offseason oftentimes contributes to these low, like low scoring games early in the year. We might have a really condensed fall camp in some of these spots. I think a team that, like you mentioned, the quarterback continuity there, they just popped in my mind. That's a team I've changed my mind about now because of that.
I'm glad you mentioned North Carolina because they were on my list of bet against. Just like it sounds like you were as well, especially with that early seed. Like you had non-conference games on the road against UCF versus Auburn early in the year. Those were two extremely difficult games. So in terms of a North Carolina season win total and to potentially make the college football playoff, I was against North Carolina, but you're right, with those two games now off the schedule and being ahead of the curve with those receivers and Sam Howell, they're a team that I think you're onto something there. That a team that you might want to upgrade just a little bit of a tick.
For sure. So kind of staying in that same lane as you just brought it up without playing the non-conference games, are there any other teams out there who you've reevaluated either positively or negatively with not having to play certain non-conference games now, or maybe because they do have to play more conference games now?
No, I think Oregon obviously is a team that you need to move up, at least in terms of the schedule. Again, they have to overcome a quarterback opening and get guys there, but you don't play the best team in the FCS, a team that is very capable of beating you to start the season. You don't have to play Ohio State. The Pac-12 as a whole is not on par with the rest of the Power 5 conferences right now. The Pac-12 has been out of the college football playoff the last few years. This really moves Oregon's chances up, at least on paper, in terms of the schedule and who they're playing. I think it gives Oregon an opportunity to crack that college football playoff this year, because you take two losable games off the schedule early in the year with the new quarterback. Their defense is going to be very, very good, and I still think their running game with that offensive line is going to be really, really good. But that Ohio State game being off of the schedule now. We've had this debate too about, is it worth it playing these games or is it not worth it playing this game? Assume Oregon were to lose a Pac-12 game and lose to Ohio State. It cost them a playoff spot last year. The loss to Auburn early in the year. So taking a losable game off of the schedule, I think, really does a world of good to the Ducks.
And I'll be watching really closely to see how well Joe Moorhead does there. He's a guy who's kind of looking for a bit of a rebound after a tough stint at Mississippi State. Obviously, Oregon's passing offense last year, at least relative to the hype, was a bit underwhelming, and they might be able to bounce back better than people think.
I'm with you there. At times, it almost looked like they were afraid to let Justin Herbert throw the ball. That Rose Bowl game, he was the MVP because he ran. They did not want him throwing the ball in the second half. It was kind of like really weird and scary to watch because they had some favorable matchups against that Wisconsin defense. But yeah, I think there were a lot of issues with the Oregon offense last year, whether it was the coordinator, whatever. But I think Moorhead's going to go there, and I agree with you. Do a great job.
Receivers there too. Just even in the preseason, we heard about it from our Oregon people that they might be an issue. And it turned out you could play a lot of single coverage on Oregon and get away with it, even with Herbert. Is there a contender out there that you're willing to pay full price on? I know you're a guy that likes underdogs, and is there a contender that you're just absolutely running away from at the current price?
I'm willing to pay full price on Ohio State for sure. Like I said, I don't. Have you seen? Has the Big 12 issued a new schedule, or this adding a game, or they take if the only game that they could potentially lose on that schedule is at Penn State? I'm paying full price on Ohio State for sure. See, Clemson is one of these teams again that I would pay full price on. I think even if I don't think Trevor Lawrence is the kind of guy who is going to not play the season. I think he is going to play. Obviously, they were a year better, a year deeper at wide receiver. Another recruiting class comes in, the defensive line, which I think people thought was going to be a liability at some point last year, which turned out to be okay, but they were young. I think they'll be better. I'm still willing to pay full price on Ohio State and Clemson for sure. Alabama, I'm not necessarily sold. I'm willing to pay full price on Alabama this year. I think defensively they had some issues. Mac Jones was fine at quarterback. I don't think they have the normal star at running back that they've normally had. Waddle, I think, is obviously a guy who could be a potential sleeper type, real price in the Heisman race. Because I think a lot of the passing game is going to run through him. The special teams are going to run through him. But I'd have a little bit of concern with wanting to pay full price on Alabama this year.
I'm watching them really intently. I really like Alabama's offensive line this year. I think that's going to be a strength. I think their coaching staff is better than it was 2 years ago as far as on-field coaching. And in some ways, I like the idea of, like, if your floor is Mac Jones and then maybe if your ceiling is Bryce Young. I don't hate that, but yet there are some questions there for sure. With LSU, so much turnover, do you really trust A&M to beat them in the West? If the SEC stays divisional, I do feel very good about them getting to Atlanta. But at that point, Georgia might be better. We don't know.
Right.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting.
I would agree with that. I mean, Oklahoma. It was funny. Oklahoma was one of those teams prior to the spread of the pandemic that I was actually looking at it like, I'd love to get a price on, will Oklahoma even reach the Big 12 championship game? Because I think this is a year where everyone always loves to joke about Joe Test and Texas is back, but I think Texas is in the best position to compete with Oklahoma for that Big 12 title as they've been in quite some time, especially in Tom Herman's third year now. I believe it is, off the top of my head. I lose track of these things, but I think obviously with Ellinger and everything that they've been building towards there, you saw them play LSU pretty tough for much of that game last year, and I think that gives you an idea of how close Texas is. And I think Iowa State, you were talking about real dark horse contenders. I think Iowa State is a team that, I mean, they were so close to beating 3 top 15 teams last year. in Iowa, Baylor, and Oklahoma. Two of those three on the road. You get Brock Purdy back. You get a defense which is probably going to be the best in the Big 12 this year. They were very, very young at running back and receiver last year. They should be improved. And they lose Iowa on the schedule. They lose a difficult non-conference game. But I think Iowa State, if you're looking for a dark horse team, that obviously Baylor's going to take a huge step back in that league. Oklahoma State, I don't know what way that's going to go. West Virginia's still in a rebuilding mode. If they can beat Oklahoma and/or Texas and hold that head-to-head tiebreak to get to the Big 12 championship game, Iowa State to make the college football playoff would certainly be a ticket that I would be interested in holding.
I think Iowa State is really interesting in that league. I get the Oklahoma State hype, but I think it's priced in to the prices, at least the prices that we saw beforehand. So that will certainly be interesting. I want to see TCU. Max Duggan is a kid who we loved as a recruit because he was a legitimate four-sport star. But that also meant he didn't play 7-on-7. He didn't do a lot of the quarterback developmental stuff. So we'll see what he can do if he can make that second-year leap. To your point on Texas, I know Bill Connolly and also FPI over there, they love Texas' defense relative to its yards per game number because Texas had to play a Big 12 schedule plus LSU last year. I mean, that was ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm glad you hit on TCU because they're another one of those teams that if you look at teams that close game luck and turnover luck, like they're the poster child this year for positive regression, winning some of these close games and having turnovers kind of even out over the course of a couple of years. So I'll be curious to see. Like there are even people that were saying that maybe not 2020, but 2021 TCU could potentially challenge for a college football playoff spot that they with Duggan and some of the other pieces that they have that they think Gary might finally have another Andy Dalton Rose Bowl type team, not 2020, but 2021.
That would be fascinating to see, and a lot of it comes down to quarterback and then staying healthy in the secondary, which last year they were not able to do. Something before we hit record today, you and I were chatting about with the ACC going conference only +1 this year and eliminating divisions. Maybe we could see some other leagues do that too. You actually think this could potentially be a catalyst, or maybe should be a catalyst, for some of these leagues that don't have these deep-seated rivalries to scrap divisions and go more the Big 12 model?
Yeah, I think the ACC should just stick with this. Right now, Clemson is running this league, and the ACC championship game has kind of been comical the last few years as a result. But it gives you the opportunity to have a Clemson Florida State ACC championship game once Florida State gets going again under Norvell. It gives you that opportunity for Florida State or Miami or Virginia Tech or North Carolina or Louisville. It gives you the opportunity for Clemson to face the second best team in the ACC and make your conference title game a little bit more of a competitive type game, more of a showcase. And maybe you're hurting your chances of getting an undefeated Clemson into the college football play, but maybe there's an opportunity where you could get two teams into the playoff. The Pac-12 was another team. Like once the Pac-12 they created that title game and started playing it on home campuses, and I liked that for the Pac-12. But right now, and maybe the Vegas move will be good for them. If indeed they're even able to play the game in Vegas this year, we'll see about that. But the Pac-12 might be another league where you want to take a look at that, because USC, obviously, I think they anticipated maybe a Washington USC or an Oregon USC every year, and they haven't gotten that. So I just like the idea of giving your league the best possible matchup in the title game, whereas the league and backers of the league and backers of these teams, I'm sure, would say we want the best opportunity to get in the playoff, and we don't want to give a big chance for our best team to lose and then totally miss out on the play. But the fan in me wants to see the best possible matchup.
At the very least, I'd like to see the Pac-12 go to pods. Give me 3-4 team pods with rotations. You'll play the other teams more often. I know they already do the 9-game, as opposed to opposed to some of these 8-game schedules. But that would be really interesting. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, the ACC thing is interesting too. with how they released the schedule with that one non-conference opening in there, almost like as a, well, you see, Georgia Tech wants to play Georgia, Clemson wants to play South Carolina, Louisville wants to play Kentucky, like all the natural ACC, SEC rivalries that are. Florida wants to play Florida State, wants to play Florida. Like all of these rivalries are built in, and now it's kind of in the SEC's court to say, okay, are we going to play the one non-conference game against an in-state type rival, or are we just going to stick to a 10-game conference schedule? So that's one of the next scheduling things that will come down the pike, I'm guessing, over the next couple of days.
Absolutely brilliant PR move by the ACC. There's no downside to saying you want to play those games. If the SEC cancels, then you get to kind of beat your chest and say they ducked us, which probably not. But yeah, there's no downside in getting that out first and kind of getting your 20 minutes is really valuable. Chris, really appreciate you coming on again. This has been a blast, and look forward to watching College Gameday this year, whether it's Connecticut, maybe in the NBA bubble down there in Orlando, or hopefully on campus where it belongs.
Absolutely. No, we're certainly hoping and wishing we can bring it to everybody and have a college football season to entertain people.